Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. What did President Trump know? When did he know it? And why didn't he do anything about it if it came across his desk? Those just some of the key questions as we learn more information about how the Russians reportedly paid bounties to the Taliban to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan.
I can tell you for a fact that a report like this would go up like a rocket to the very top, to the White House. There's just no doubt in my mind that the president would have been made aware of this.
That's a retired four-star admiral talking about the explosive new report in the New York Times, saying that the president was told about the bounties. And again, I'm now going to quote from the piece. American officials provided a written briefing in late February to President Trump, laying out their conclusion that a Russian military intelligence unit offered and paid bounties to Taliban-linked militants to kill U.S. and coalition troops in Afghanistan. By the way, CNN also reporting that the bounty story was included in a presidential daily briefing that the White House is denying that the president saw. But in fact, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are now demanding answers. White House intelligence officials, they met with 8 Republican lawmakers yesterday, and earlier today they spoke with Democrats. We will speak with one of those Democrats in a minute. But that briefing, it left many on both sides of the aisle, including Republicans, unsatisfied. Congressman Mac Thornberry of Texas, he one of them. The ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee issued a statement. Quote, "What the president and the DNI have said is that the president was not briefed, which to me is a very concerning statement. Anything with any hint of credibility that would endanger our service members, much less put a bounty on their lives, to me, should have been briefed immediately to the commander-in-chief in a plan to deal with that situation." Congressman Adam Kinzinger, he was also in the room, and the Illinois Republican, who's an Air National Guard pilot, he posted this tweet. "Russia is not a partner and not to be negotiated with. Trump needs to immediately expose and handle this and stop Russia's shadow war." Now, both Democrats and Republicans, they are not taking the White House's word for it. They're demanding more information, including Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader.
I am calling for the directors of national intelligence and the CIA to immediately brief all 100 senators on reports that Russia placed bounties on U.S. troops in Afghanistan. If we'd learned anything in the past 3 years, it's that President Trump is inclined to ignore or forgive Vladimir Putin's abuses on the international stage, even in the face of an attack on our democracy.
From my 2 cents, with all the scandals that have rocked this administration and this president, the most unforgivable sin that he could have possibly committed is if this story is true. Again, to reiterate, Russians, not our ally, paying a bounty to glorify terrorists that are the Taliban to kill American soldiers. We were made aware of it, and our president did nothing and even advocated benefits to Russia in the interim. My friends, it does not get worse than that. I'm going to bring in a CIA agent in a few minutes here who's got unbelievable perspective on this, and he was on the ground in Afghanistan. But first, let's bring in our initial guest, Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. She's a Democrat from New Jersey, and she's also a former Navy pilot and also a Russia policy officer. When this story broke, for the people who do not have your background, many of us were just shocked by 2 things. One, that the Russians would be capable of something of this, allegedly, and 2, the indifference or worse by the administration. To the first part, from somebody who studied Russian policy when you're in the military, did this shock you? Did you think that they were capable of literally paying a terrorist organization to target American soldiers?
So, as you mentioned, I was a Russian policy officer, and we know that the Russians don't share our values. In fact, they're often operating in a zero-sum game. If we're gaining power, prestige across the world, they think that's bad, and vice versa. So we know they've been bad actors in Afghanistan and Syria, and yet to put bounties on the heads of U.S. soldiers, that really crosses a line.
Then we get to the second part. We're going to be speaking with the former high-ranking official within the CIA in terms of how intelligence works, but I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say this allegation was that the Iranians had paid terrorists to target and kill American soldiers. Do you have any doubt that this administration wouldn't have made this a huge priority and been very vocal about needing to go after, or certainly it would have been risen to the level that the president would have made this a priority in a PDB? Like, what we're trying to understand is how could this possibly not rise to the level that a president wouldn't be notified of it and at least be made to make a decision to either demand more intelligence to either support or knock this down? But how could a president not know about its existence?
Well, I think that really touches on my concern because as we know, intelligence is complicated. It comes from so many different sources, many of them contradictory. So sometimes it's hard to judge the utility of intelligence. But when the president has been on the phone with Vladimir Putin 5 times since March and was not briefed on this possibility, these allegations, that really concerns me. And furthermore, the fact that now that he evidently has been briefed up on this, the fact that he hasn't come out and said anything to the American people. As somebody who's served before, as someone who knows families who have service members overseas, they deserve to know where the president stands on this. They deserve to know that the president is going to do everything in his power as commander-in-chief to get to the bottom of this, and then, if these allegations prove true, that there will be some repercussions for the Russians.
In fact, we've already heard of some family members who've lost loved ones potentially in some of the alleged attacks. They're heartbroken right now, and they don't know where their government stands by not just the revelation of the story, but in the 24-plus hours since it's broken, the lack of urgency, at least from the administration, to the point that when you had your briefing, I understand it, you had no one from Intel. CIA wasn't there to do the briefing. This was largely administration officials who couldn't answer your questions. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, we really do need to hear directly from the intelligence sources, because when you're talking about these allegations, in order to best weigh the intelligence, we need to hear directly from the intelligence agencies, the CIA, the NSA, and about their reporting. And so that was something that, again, we expressed some disappointment that they weren't in the room this morning, and we plan to meet with them going forward.
Yesterday, Congresswoman, I spoke to former Senator Bob Kerrey, not only a member of the Intel Committee when he was in the Senate, but also Congressional Medal of Honor winner himself. He said from his end, he didn't know what was worse. If the president knew and did nothing and, in fact, advocated to get the Russians involved, to be admitted, I should say, into the G8, or that there was prisoner swaps with the Taliban in the interregnum, or that the fact that the president was out of the loop, and we saw from the briefing yesterday, they wouldn't say whether or not this was even in the PDB. What to you would be worse? The president didn't know, or know and did nothing?
Well, it's certainly horrible to contemplate the president knowing that there were these allegations and not doing everything he could to get to the bottom of it. But I would almost say that the president not knowing is even scarier, because that speaks to an organizational failure on a larger scale. And possibly it's the constant churn in leadership in his administration. But for whatever reason, he has said he was not briefed. And to me, that presents a larger scale problem.
I know it's hard in the day and age of COVID to be able to meet in large groups for obvious reasons. I'm seeing some mixed messaging from your Republican counterparts. For example, I saw from Congresswoman Cheney, who seems to be pretty livid, articulating some of the same concerns that you've had, and other Republicans also to the same. Others saying they're seemingly more angry that the media reported this story. Do you have a sense as to how much consensus there is in Washington right now in Congress to get to the bottom of this? And if there is any truth to the fact that folks knew in this administration and did nothing when American soldiers were targeted and possibly killed, that they will be held to pay?
So I think there is a consensus from everyone I've spoken to in national security, in on my side of the aisle. There seems to be a large group of people on the other side of the aisle who also are incredibly concerned about the reporting about Russia. You know, any of us who've been working in this area for years and have worked with the Russians, you understand that they are not good actors. They are not our allies. They have a different value system and they have a different agenda with respect to what they want to accomplish in the world. And in most places in the world, it is contrary to what we would like to see happen there. When we're promoting democracy and human rights and stability in certain regions across the world, we have come in conflict with the Russian program in Syria, in Afghanistan, and certainly now this reporting is tremendously concerning. And just, again, as someone who served, as someone who has really said that I would go and fight for this country, possibly give my life for this country, the expectation that I had, the expectation that people who serve have, is that leadership will respect that leadership will have your back, so to speak.
Just last night, we covered the graduation ceremony at West Point, and the president said to those graduating cadets that the U.S. will stand with you wherever you are, no matter what. You can honestly call into question, God forbid, if these allegations prove true, just how much substance there is behind some of that dialogue. Congresswoman, I wish you the best of luck in getting to the bottom of this, and thank you for the time.
Thank you so much.
After the break, a former CIA officer will join us to discuss all of the intelligence aspects of this bounty story, including how something like this should go up the food chain, that is, in a functional administration.